I'm 87 years old, and I want to tell you something that took me 8 decades to understand. Most of the things I suffered over in my life, I chose to suffer over them. Not consciously, not because I enjoyed it, but because I had beliefs about myself that I never once stopped to question. Beliefs about what I owed people, about what made me worthy, about what would happen if I stopped being everything to everyone. And those beliefs cost me. They cost me time. They cost me peace. They cost me years I cannot get back. Then I turned 80, and one by one I started letting them go. Not because I stopped caring about people, but because I finally understood that caring about people and destroying yourself for them are not the same thing. In this video, I'm going to share 7 things I stopped caring about after 80. 7 beliefs I carried for most of my life that I finally put down, and why my life got better the moment I did. The 7th one is the hardest, because it doesn't feel like a burden. It feels like who you are. Stay with me. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here because I wish someone had sat across from me at 40, at 50, at 60, and said what I'm about to say. Because nobody did. And I lost years. Not to illness, not to tragedy, to beliefs that were never true, but felt completely real. Here they are. Number 1, needing people to understand me. Not to approve of me, not to agree with me, just to understand me. For most of my life, I carried a quiet ache every time I felt misread. Every time someone got me wrong, assumed the worst, or walked away from a conversation with a version of me that wasn't me at all. I would spend days after those moments replaying what I should have said, how I could have explained myself better, how I could have made them see. I remember a falling out I had with someone I had known for 20 years. She misunderstood something I had done. She told others before she asked me, and by the time I found out, the story had already hardened into fact. I spent months trying to correct it, writing letters in my head, rehearsing conversations that never happened, desperately needing, for her to see that she had me wrong. She never did. And at 80, I finally understood why those months had been such a waste. Because whether she understood me or not changed nothing about who I actually was. The people who know you know you. You don't have to convince them. And the people who have already decided who you are, no explanation will ever be enough. After 80, I stopped needing to be correctly understood by people who had no intention of trying. I know who I am. That is enough. How much of your energy goes into correcting the image other people have of you? And what would you do with that energy if you simply stopped? Number 2, being right. I didn't speak to my sister for 9 years. 9 years. It started over our mother's estate, money, an old piece of furniture, who had sacrificed more at the end. The kind of argument that starts with facts and ends with everything you have ever quietly resented about each other finally having an excuse to come out. I was right about parts of it. I was wrong about parts of it. But mostly, what I was proud. She called me on a Thursday in November. I was 78. She was 74. She didn't apologize. Neither did I. She just said, "I don't want to keep doing this." And I said, "Neither do I." We talked for 3 hours that night about our mother, about things we remembered differently, about everything the silence had cost us. She died 4 years later. I think about that Thursday phone call more than almost anything else in my life. Not because it fixed everything, but because it gave us 4 years we would not have had otherwise. And because I know with absolute certainty that if I had kept holding on to being right, I would have stood at her funeral with 9 years of silence and nothing left to do with it. Being right is cold comfort when the person you were right against is no longer there to hear it. Is there someone in your life you are waiting to apologize first? Someone you miss but won't call because of something that happened years ago? What exactly are you waiting for? Number 3, earning my children's love by being perfect. I had 2 children, and for most of their childhood, I operated under a belief I had never consciously chosen, but had somehow absorbed completely. The belief that if I was good enough, patient enough, present enough, selfless enough, they would turn out right. And if they didn't, it would be my fault. I remember when my son was 19, he made a decision I thought was a mistake. I didn't shout, I didn't cry. I went very quiet in the way that I now know was worse than shouting. And that night I lay awake asking myself where I had gone wrong, what I had missed, what I should have done differently when he was 7, when he was 12, when he was 15. As if his choices at 19 were a report card on my motherhood. Years later, he was in his 40s, we were having dinner. He said something I wasn't expecting. He said, "Mom, you always seem so worried about whether you were doing it right. I just wanted you to sit down and be with me." I didn't have an answer for that, because he was right. I had been so focused on performing good motherhood that I had sometimes missed actually doing it. After 80, I stopped believing that love is something you earn by being perfect. My children love me, not because I never made mistakes. They love me because I was there, imperfect and present. That was always enough. Is there someone in your life you are exhausting yourself trying to be perfect for? And have you ever considered that what they actually want is just more of you? The real you, not the performance. Number 4, the fear of disappointing people who didn't really matter to me. There is a difference between not wanting to disappoint someone you love and not wanting to disappoint someone simply because you don't want them to think badly of you. For most of my life, I treated those two things as the same. I remember joining a local committee when I was in my 50s. I had no interest in it. I had no time for it. But the woman who asked me was persistent, and I didn't want her to think I was the kind of person who didn't contribute. I sat on that committee for 6 years. 6 years of Tuesday evenings I will never get back. For a woman whose opinion of me I have not thought about once in the 15 years since I left. After 80, I started asking a different question every time I felt that familiar fear. If this person were no longer in my life tomorrow, would I grieve them? If the answer was no, I stopped letting their opinion cost me anything. Think about the last time you did something you didn't want to do. How much of it was for someone you love? And how much of it was for someone whose name you'll barely remember in 10 years? Number 5, believing that time was always recoverable. I spent decades living as if there was always more time coming. I'll call her next week. I'll take that trip when things settle down. I'll tell him what he means to me when I find the right moment. The right moment never came. My husband and I had talked for years about going back to the village where we had met. We were young there. We were new to each other there. It was the place where everything had started. We always said, next year, when the children are older, when work eases up, when we have more money, when we have more time. He died before we went. I went alone 2 years later. I stood in the street where we had first walked together, and I thought, we had the time. We always had the time. We just kept lending it to later. After 80, I stopped believing in later as a place where things would finally happen. Later is not a place. It is what we call the present, when we are too afraid to use it. Is there something in your life you have been saving for later? A conversation, a trip, a phone call. Later is not guaranteed. Today is. Number 6, the belief that I would stop mattering the moment I stopped being useful. For most of my life, my worth was tied to what I could do for the people around me. I cooked, I organized, I solved problems, I showed up when people needed things. I was the one you called when you didn't know what to do. And underneath that, if I'm honest, there was a fear. The fear that if I stopped giving, people would stop coming. That if I needed something for once, if I was tired, if I was struggling, if I had nothing left to offer, the room would empty. When I was 76, I had a difficult year. My health was uncertain. I couldn't do the things I usually did. I had to ask for help instead of giving it. And something happened that I did not expect. People came anyway. My daughter came. My son called every few days. Friends I hadn't leaned on in years showed up at my door with food and quiet company. Not because I had done something for them recently, but because they loved me. Just me. You are not loved for what you do. You are loved for who you are. Do you believe you are loved even when you have nothing to offer? Or are you still trying to earn it? Number 7. And I told you this one would be the hardest, because it doesn't feel like a burden. It feels like being responsible. It feels like just waiting until the time is right. Waiting for the right moment to start living the life I actually wanted. I had a version of my life in my head, a life where I had more time, more peace, more space to think, more mornings that belonged only to me. I was going to read more, learn things I had always been curious about, spend whole afternoons doing nothing useful and not feeling guilty about it. I was going to do all of that when the children were grown, when work was finished, when the house was paid for, when things finally calmed down. The children grew up, work finished, the house was paid for, and I looked around at 65 and realized I had no idea how to live the life I had been waiting for, because I had spent so long preparing to live it that I had never actually practiced. I sat in my garden one morning. I remember this clearly. It was early, before anyone else was awake. The light was coming through the trees. There was nothing I needed to do, nowhere I needed to be. And I felt nothing. Not peace, not joy, just emptiness. Because I didn't know how to be there. I had spent 40 years being somewhere else in my mind, planning, worrying, preparing, and the present moment had become a place I no longer recognized. It took me years after that morning to learn how to come back, to sit in a room without needing to be doing something, to take a slow walk with no destination and feel like that was enough. To understand that the life I had been waiting for was not a destination. After 80, I stopped waiting for the moment when life would finally feel right. I stopped treating the present like a waiting room for something better. And I started being here, imperfectly, quietly, but here. What is the life you are waiting to start? And what is it exactly that you are waiting for? Because from 87 years, the waiting does not end on its own. You have to decide to stop. I am 87 years old. I have made mistakes I cannot fix. I have loved people imperfectly and been loved imperfectly in return. But I have also had mornings that belonged entirely to me. Conversations that went on too long because neither of us wanted to leave. Moments of ordinary grace that I almost missed because I was too busy being useful, being right, being enough. The life you are waiting to feel ready for, you are already inside it. Put down one thing today, just one, the need to be understood by someone who never will. The old argument you are still carrying, the moment you have been saving for later, just one, and see what happens when it is no longer yours to carry. Which one of these 7 are you still carrying? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if someone in your life needs to hear this today, share it with them. Take care of yourself. I mean that.